We're joined by Sergio Liden, human rights activist and author, who recently released a children's book entitled His Own Way. It addresses the subject of autism and acceptance. Sergio, welcome.
Thank you so much, Miss Aragon. Hello to you and to everybody listening and watching your show. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you. It's an honor.
Well, you delve into a variety of topics in your writing. Autism, I know, is near and dear to your heart because of your son. It's a subject that you want others to have a better understanding of. And this happens to be Autism Awareness Month. So it seems like a great opportunity to engage in further dialogue. What's the main area you want to convey regarding autism, and how do you do that in a children's book?
Autism Awareness Month. Thank you for the question. Autism Awareness Month, in the United States, starts in April. On April 2nd, it goes throughout the month. World Autism Day is April 6th. So this is an international, not just a US issue. Australia, 1 in 70 children are diagnosed. In Canada, it's 1 in 44. When my son was first diagnosed, it was about 13 years ago. He was 3 years old. It was 1 in 150 children in the United States that were diagnosed with autism. Today, it's 1 in 54. Probably more testing. The aspect of, divorce rates 10% higher with with couples that have a child with autism. We have those stats. We have those numbers. Organizations like Autism Speaks are out there to help parents, navigate. There's a great school system in Los Angeles, the Help Group, the private school that biggest autism school around here. We have information on what autism is. As a parent with a child with autism, I wasn't sure what autism was. When my son was diagnosed with autism, my wife and I weren't sure if that meant that he was mentally retarded, or if that meant that it was a death sentence. We did not know what anything was. He was 3, my daughter was 5, and we freaked out. After a while, we slowly came to understand what autism was. We leaned on each other as parents for that support, for that strength, did not blame each other or whatever it was for why he had autism. We just came to understand and accept that he did have autism. And in that first year, we ignored our daughter, who's typical. This was kind of the term that's used for children without a disability. I looked at the illustrations that my daughter did during that 1 year between 5 and 6, when I wasn't present for her, when we weren't present for her, and they were very sad, and I realized, we have the information for the child with autism. We have information with regards to stats on marriage. Child with a disability, you'll either get a divorce, it'll break you, or it'll make you stronger. What we don't have, which is something that I did, which is write a book about what it's like being a sibling of a child with autism. What's it like being a sibling of, a kid with autism? The book is His Own Way. dadspublishing.com is where you can get it. It's only on ebooks for about a year until the pandemic is over. Then it'll make the logistics a little easier. Then we'll put it out as a hardcover. But it's written from a 5-year-old. All my books are narrated by children. I've written over 30. This is the 4th that we're releasing through dadspublishing.com. We'll be releasing every month and a half, every 2 months for the next 5 years. We have schedules. But it's a 5-year-old girl who sees that her brother is autistic. And though she doesn't understand what it is, she sees the physical attributes that come with it. It starts off with, my brother is autistic. It really is quite funny. It means he opens and closes doors all day and hops around like a bunny. That's what she saw. The reality was, when he was opening and closing doors all day, we stopped it because we were afraid that he was going to slam his fingers on the door, the jam. About 5 or 7 hours after the crying, once the crying ended, 5 or 7 hours later, because he was so upset that he couldn't open and close the door, we realized, we're going to let him open and close the door. And the only difference was now I had my hand in the door jamb. So his fingers were safe. My hand, of course, was in jeopardy on a regular basis. That's kind of what we did. He loved to run. He was the first child in the state of California. And with anybody with a child with autism, they don't actually acknowledge and understand danger. He was the first person in the history of California, youngest person, to have both a handicap plate and a handicap placard. The plate goes to a car, the placard goes to any vehicle it goes in. He was 6 years old at the time when we did that for him. We can advocate for our children. It was dangerous going to the store with him. He ran out in front of parking, in front of cars. He was diagnosed with severe autism. That's what the doctor said. I'm not a doctor, so I just listen to the doctors. My only job is a dad. My son does things his own way, and once we realized that, uh, everything became much easier. But under the underlying concept is the fact that we all do things our own way. We all have quirks. You have quirks, I have quirks. The aspect is, instead of looking at the differences as, who we are and how we do things, it's kind of important to focus on our shared humanity. And if we do that, it becomes a lot easier. The book is easy to, it's easy to show the differences in the physical attributes with regards to behavior with my son. If you look at the book, I write the books and then I storyboard all the books, and which means kind of draw. And then I send them to Francesco Razzini to do the illustrations. And if you look at them, you'll see all the photographs in the background that, it's mom, dad, daughter standing up. And then my son, or the boy with autism who's laying down or in some really crazy position. That's the way that it was. If we come to understand and accept the fact that we're all a little bit different, then we come to understand that being different is the norm, and the root word of norm is normal. That's so we're all normal by doing things our own way, in the way that my son was slamming the door or running, or bouncing around like a bunny, or waking up way too early from my wife with a smile, or when he was happy, he would pee in the crib. Didn't matter what it was. And it was finally the connection that he had with my daughter, with his sister. That's how everything got fixed. There's no therapy that I could have done to connect them. It was this love that they had. Though the book is really funny at the beginning, it gets really kind of heart-wrenching. And at the very end, it's this connection that turns out to be a beautiful story with regards to the understanding that my daughter had when her brother came to her. My son did not eat solid food for 11 years. He was fed out of a bowl that my wife used, a specific bowl and a specific spoon that my wife used. For myself, it was a different bowl and a different spoon. We could not share the bowls or use different spoons. It was very specific. I don't know if it was about the need of control that he had, but he finally started eating solid food because of my daughter, because of his older sister, the aspect of trust that he had for her. For us as parents, when he was diagnosed with autism, it was let's fix, let's work. My job is to fix. When my wife was pregnant, it was, I just want a healthy child. What was it, boy or girl? I don't care. I just want healthy. And then when I had a son who was diagnosed with autism, I was like, oh my God, I failed. Now I need to fix this because it's my job to fix it. And it's been a blessing, seeing him and accepting that he does things his own way. I understand there's certain things we cannot do, but it's been a blessing because he's taught me he's the sweetest child in the world. He doesn't get, if he doesn't do the door thing any longer. But when I allowed him to go ahead, and I understood, for example, with the door example, that I let him open and close the door all day, he was happy. He was smiling. With us, we were trying to fix him. His sister said, I'm accepting him for who he is. I'm going to accept him with the fact that he does things his own way in his timing. And at the age of 11, she convinced him to eat solid food, to try solid food. And hasn't stopped eating. Now he eats everything. He's a beast. He's almost 6 feet tall. He's 16 years old and he eats more than the rest of the family. And he's really skinny, which makes me very upset. As a big guy, it's like, wow, I don't eat, and I get fat. Him, he eats, 7-8 meals a day, and he goes to the buffet. It's competition. I will win. That's kind of his thinking. But he's amazing. He's beautiful. He's wonderful. And accepting him as who he is, so today we've only been able to grow slowly, understanding slowly. I've come to understand that autism does not have a cure. It is not deadly. It does not mean he's retarded. It simply means that he's autistic. And every child with autism is different. So one cure for all, there is none. With regards to, my daughter, I love her completely. And I will not ignore her or neglect her. Divorce is 10% higher amongst parents that have autism. With a child with, with parents that have a child with autism, because very difficult and very painful. But to parents, if there was any one thing I would say to parents out there that have a child with autism, simply don't blame. That doesn't help. Don't accuse. It's your fault, my fault, whatever it is. And it's a slow journey on what it is, what the things are that are going to annoy your child. The objective is make life simple, make it happy, make it easy. Don't ignore those other children, the typical siblings, the other children, because it's not their responsibility. That's not their job. It's our job as parents to make sure that they have somebody that they can go to. And if you lean on each other, you and your spouse, or whoever it is that is with you, if you lean on each other for the support, it's actually really kind of, it's simple. It's easy. There's no difference between I can't with children, with parents that have children that are all typical. I've got many friends who have kids that are all typical, and those parents are always complaining to me about the behavior of the kids, about the insanity of being a parent. And I'm in bliss. I'm in utter bliss as a parent. Having a child that's autistic, it's bliss. Having a daughter it's bliss. Having these children is bliss, because I've done my job as a parent. I don't see children as acting up, because the prefrontal cortex, which is located right here in the front of the brain, is not fully developed until the age of 25. That's kind of the part of the brain that tells us about consequences and human interaction, connecting with other individuals. It's not developed until the age of 25. So, so with that idea, how can I, express the fact that my daughter at the age of 5 or 6, or now that she just turned 18, how can I say that she's acting up? She doesn't know how to act up. Her prefrontal cortex is not yet developed completely. She's reacting up. There's something that's going on around her, which is getting her to respond in a way that we may have called negative behavior, but it's not information that she didn't decide one day I'm going to be angry. It's it's neglect. That was back then. It was ignoring her. It was putting an incredible amount of pressure on her to do things on her own, because we were so focused on the other child. And stop doing that. My son was diagnosed with severe autism. We were told these are the milestones he will never meet. He's met every one of them. He will never eat solid food. Yeah, he caught that one, and he knocked that one out of the park. Eye contact. He has eye contact. The verbal communication, telling you what he wants. These are things that will never take place. He's done all of them. The limitations that we have as people are the limitations we choose to accept. When somebody tells me I cannot do something, they're only telling me, what I'm hearing is them telling me that they were not able to achieve that goal, that they were not able to achieve it. So the limitations we have are only those that we choose to accept. Maybe having a child, a child with a disability, or a child without a disability, or even if we're just simply speaking about ourselves.
Sergio, you mentioned that when you and your wife first learned that your son was autistic, you obviously were concerned. You didn't know what it was. You didn't know, was it a death sentence? You said, obviously you were worried. You knew that your son was a little different than your daughter and other children. And then you needed to share, because at some point, I'm assuming you had to have the conversation with your daughter of why her brother, reacted slightly different, why he spoke in a different way, why he behaved in a certain manner. What would you say as a parent, and what can you share with others? What was your experience of how you had that conversation? And for those that aren't terribly familiar with what autism is, because we hear the word quite a bit, and you mentioned it early on that it is something that's being diagnosed much more so than it ever was before. But I don't know that people have a real understanding. And actually, you provided some good examples of what that is. So I guess what I want to convey to our viewers is, how do you share that with other siblings? But even as a parent, what can you share with parents about what that is, and how to accept it, and everything's going to be okay.
The answer is going to make you laugh. Well, how do you tell the sibling that, you know, how do you tell one child that their sibling is autistic? It made me laugh when I got when I heard the response. When my daughter was a little bit older, I didn't tell her when she was 5 years old. There was no way that she could comprehend it when my son was diagnosed at the age of 3. When she was a little bit older, I told her, you know, your brother's autistic. You know, that means he does things, you know, his own way.
Joining us is singer, poet, and actor Flaco Navaja, who released his new single, Cántale a la Vida, which translates in Spanish to Sing a Song to Life, a special project produced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Flaco, it's a pleasure meeting you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you as well.
This past year has brought changes to everyone's life, including time for some to delve into their creative side. You immersed yourself into music. Was the single something you were working on, or was it something that organically happened during this period?
It was something that organically happened. Absolutely. Early on during the pandemic, a melody popped into my head. It was as simple as that. And it was the first time that a melody came in the form of the entire song. Like, it was super clear in terms of what was the verse, where was the bridge, where was the chorus section, and I just didn't have any lyrics. Um, I knew it was or an organic response to what's happening, and the need to contribute to the narrative. So I eventually reached out to a good friend of mine asking for advice about songwriting, and he ended up becoming my collaborator, and that's my brother Obi Bermudez, who is an amazing singer, songwriter, artist, Latin Grammy winner.
Brother as in relative, or brother as in, somebody you hold very dear and respect and trust?
The latter, yeah.
Okay.
Brother as in my brother from another mother.
Hey, which is still family.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I listened to the single, and the rhythm brought me back to classic, like old school music with a twist. Because I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, I like this. I'm hearing the clave, I'm hearing the drums, and then all of a sudden I hear spoken words.
I started my career as a spoken word artist. My initial performance experience was in the open mics of the New Eureka Poets Cafe and other venues in New York City, as a poet in the late '90s. And but I always had a passion for singing. So I ended up using the poetry as a vehicle that allowed me to sing, because I had a captive audience. I was on stage, and I had people there listening to me. So I would sing a cappella old school salsa tunes, and then recite poetry that I'd written that dealt with the same themes of the songs.
Have audiences reacted to that combination? Because it's unique.
It definitely set me apart at the time from my peers. And it, I didn't think about it. It was kind of just what happened. I was blessed to have started at such a young age. So it was as I was discovering what life was, and living through a young adulthood, and all of those struggles, I was also kind of embarking on a professional artistic life, and it all kind of came together, and all of my influences came out on stage just naturally, and it was something that throughout the years I was able to kind of realize what was working, what wasn't, and kind of owning who I am as an artist.
You've mentioned, so you've combined your love for poetry along with your love for salsa music. So what's beautiful about it is that you've entered two genres, Latinos and the American market. How have you handled that? And what is it like with the audiences? Because usually it's either or. You either have the
Yeah,
American market or you have salsa lovers and Latinos. So you have a unique experience, in my humble opinion.
thank you. I can only be myself. So being a young, being a person that grew up in the South Bronx, and from a super proud Puerto Rican family, um, salsa music has always been part of the soundtrack of my life. But so has hip hop, and so has classic rock and roll, and other things that I got. I'm the youngest of five, so I kind of inherited the musical taste of my older siblings, you know. And I don't believe that it's necessary to compartmentalize it all. I think they can all coexist, and they just do, and that's how it is. So it's been received super well, and I think throughout it's what I've done throughout my career, and whether it be singing a cappella salsa music in poetry shows or doing poetry in a straight up salsa song at a regular salsa gig with my band. Yeah.
So we mentioned at the beginning of our interview, this was done during COVID. And when I was listening to the single, you mentioned things like Black Lives Matter. So clearly it doesn't seem like that was a coincidence. You
Not
were
at all.
influenced by what was happening at the time.
Absolutely. You know, this year has been a difficult one to say the least. It's also been a historic one. It's also been an exciting one in a sense of it's a time where we are seeing young people take to the streets, and people of all generations kind of take a stand and come together to voice their opinion, to fight for what they believe is right, and to kind of show up and be counted and heard. And during when we're faced with difficult times, we're faced with a decision. Do we go forward into the negative aspect of what's going on and stay in our pity and wallow and be angry and stay in our anger? Or do we celebrate the fact that we are alive and focus on the positives of what's going on? And I felt the need to, in this song, comment on the fact that this is what a time to be alive, for lack of better words. It's amazing. Yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's been difficult, and been a long 8 months or so, or something like that. And also, we have been dealing with 4 years of a difficult and president that divided people and not unified them. But the young people showed up in record numbers, and we have a new president elect, and there's all this social change happening, and the fight is just beginning, but it's an important time. And I felt the need as an artist and a responsibility to comment on that and contribute to the narrative of this historic time.
Now, beautifully said. I read something. You described this single as a testament to the beauty of life, the resilience of the human spirit, and the power of un pueblo unido, a united town. I read that statement, and what came to mind was mindfulness, idealism, and someone whose perspective has been impacted by personal experiences. What's the truth behind that statement?
Yeah,
It's in depth.
what's that?
It was definitely an in-depth statement.
Thanks. I mean, I think it's interesting when we embarked on the releasing of the single and having to talk about this song, something that you created in a way that it's almost like you're talking about it from the outside. Is a very interesting thing, you know. So when I was asked to describe the song in short statements, I feel like that statement kind of sums it up, because of, like I mentioned earlier, this year being difficult and historic one. It's like, yeah, we see the strength of un pueblo unido, and it's been shown. Even last year, when young people took to the streets of Puerto Rico and forced their governor to resign, that was a historic time and super inspiring. And yeah, and we are resilient people. Like, it's been a long 8 months in this pandemic, and I see all of people all over the country dealing, and yeah, dealing because they have no other choice, unfortunately, because we didn't have a president and an administration that had any way of dealing with this issue. But like, yeah, seeing communities come together and take care of each other and families, and this time has forced us to, we're home now, so we're, yeah, it's kind of shifted my perspective on what's important, and where physically you are, how important it is to be with your family.
I found when I also came across something on Facebook, and I'm quoting your words. It said, "I'm the son of hardcore Puerto Rican nationalists, a salsa singing follower of Jesus Christ." And when I read that statement along with the other statement, it made me think like we were experiencing perhaps something similar. And I know, and share with me, I'm curious, but I'm going through a period, I think, as I get older, and also during the last several months, of a lot of reflection and my perspective on life changing in a way that I didn't think it would. Because I have to say, I've always been pretty balanced. I don't know that from my 20s to now, I'm completely different. My personality's remained about the same, pretty level headed. But I have noticed in the last year or so, just my perspective because of past experiences, because what I'm seeing around me has changed. Does that impact what you're doing, whether it's the poetry, your music, your lyrics? Your sound,
Yeah,
that change?
yeah, absolutely. I think when I look back at the body of work that I've created throughout the years, I started writing poetry and performing poetry professionally in 1998 or so. I was about 18 years old. I'm in my 40s now, and have not looked back. It's like I'm in too deep at this point. Like, to shift and try to do something else, it's not going to happen. So you know, throughout the years, like I said before, I'm a product of my influences. I'm also a product of my experiences, and I think the art comes from those places. And yeah, perspectives change. What you find important now isn't the same thing as you may have found important when you were in your 20s. And yeah, I'm a husband. I'm a father now. It's a different world, and that perspective on that, it just adds to the multi-layered filter that you look at the world through. You know, I see it now as through different eyes because of having two little baby girls. You know?
What were some of your musical influences growing up?
Yeah. So I come from a super Puerto Rican family. My father, his way of instilling pride in being Puerto Rican in us is by ridiculing us and saying that we weren't. He'd be like, tú no eres puertorriqueño, tú eres americano. No, I'm not, papi, I'm Puerto Rican. And but so music is a big part of our family. He wasn't a musician, but he listened to a lot of music. So I may not have liked it when I was a kid. I love this music now, but in the background in our home always was playing old school, like boleros, like música romántica from groups like Trio de los Condes and Felipe Pirela and Odilio Gonzalez, and a lot of mountain Puerto Rican music, Jibaro music from las montañas and things like Ramito and Olivia Gonzalez. So so that was in the background always. I had an uncle who went to Vietnam, came home, and was a mad salsero, New Rican, big influence on me. My uncle Maximino, politician, activist, community activist, all of these things. So he was the mad salsero. So that was also another layer in that early on I was drawn to without knowing necessarily why. There was something about the sound, the rhythms and the voices. I was very early on drawn to salsa music by like 10 years old, which comes where I got the name Flaco Navaja. I'll let you know about that in a second. I'll remember. So that was in the thing. But like I said before, I'm the youngest of five. So at one point, I don't know, early on as well, 10 years old, around that same time. My sister, one of my older sister, goes away to college. I inherit her room. And being the nosy kid I was looking through all this stuff. I find a box of cassette tapes. And in this box of cassette tapes was this random eclectic mix of music, from the Best of the Doors to the soundtrack of the Woodstock documentary. That's where I got my love for classic rock and roll, and like Janis Joplin and all of these type of people, Jimi Hendrix and Santana and that kind of stuff. Then she also had like the soundtrack to the movie A Clockwork Orange, which was all classical music. And I remember her at one point asking her to see that movie, and she was like, "Absolutely not! You can't watch that movie." It's such a violent, crazy Stanley Kubrick film. So yeah, so I was this kid that loved, like, I couldn't go to sleep without playing the Best of the Doors. It was one of those things that I just did. So though all those voices kind of marinated in this warped brain of mine, and that's who I am now. But the intro to like salsa, yeah, one of the first songs that I sang in front of people and kind of got a reaction that showed me that I was on to something per se. I was in a family gathering, and there was a song. There is a song called "Todos Vuelven," and I believe, I'm not sure if Ruben Blades wrote it, but I heard that song for the first time in the soundtrack of a film called Crossover Dreams that he did. And he's it's a film where he's playing like a pop singer trying to cross over to an American market, and his mentor is this old school salsa singer named Vigilio Malti, who's a brilliant voice, and I love his voice so much. And there's this scene where Ruben's kind of playing his pop music to the guy, and the guy's like, "Turn it off, man! You got to play this," and starts playing the clave with two pencils, and he sings a song, "Todos Vuelven." And I love that song. It's one of the first songs I ever learned. And I sang that song in front of my family, and like my uncle's wife starts crying, and it was just this experience. And then that kind of that's when I started going down the rabbit hole of salsa music and listening to all Ruben Blade stuff. And then for some reason got put on to Hector Lavoe, and that was it. He was kind of like my main influence growing up. And yeah, but I always kind of had this other musical rhythm under, this whole other side of me that, and what's funny, if I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but not that much. What's funny to me is that I feel like salsa music has always been to me like hip hop, like they were one in the same. And it has to do with the fact that they were both born out of struggle in communities that were mixed. They were both the soundtrack of the times for people. They are the commentary. They follow the long traditions of telling the story of the people that haven't had their voice heard. And even like musically, hip hop drew from all these sources, So like I remember hearing Cheo Feliciano song El Raton with the Fania All Stars live in Yankee Stadium. I wasn't there, but I saw a video, and the bass line is like, "Dum, dum, 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 dum." And that to me just felt like a hip hop song, and I was like, that made me go further into like salsa and my love for it, and feeling a license to be a practitioner of it. Yeah, sorry, I went off for a while there.
No, no, not at all. I got excited just listening to it, and I can relate in many respects. You talked about all these different interests that you have. You are also an ensemble member of the Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, which has brought to mind the Fania All Stars. You were talking about your influences and growing up. I know that with myself, my father enjoyed listening to numerous musicians, and the Fania All Stars. I know it was definitely something I was hearing around the house. They were, for those viewers that may not be familiar with the Fania All Stars, they were a musical group that was formed in the late 60s.
Yeah.
Why do you think that comparison exists?
I think the Fania All Stars created music during a time that there was a lot going on, politically, socially, in our communities. And that's what made their music stand the test of time. And also, they were all just amazing. I mean, the fact that they were called All Stars is not to be taken lightly. They were each stars in their own right. For me to draw a comparison to them, I don't think it's earned or warranted just yet. But I am directly influenced by them. I do stand on their shoulders in as an artist and come from that school. So yeah, I am a student of that, and I do feel like I'm striving to tell my story and tell the stories of those that I feel are underrepresented.
Tell us more about your involvement with the Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater Company.
Absolutely, the Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater Company. So these are Pregones is a theater company that was born in the Bronx, so about 40 years ago, and they are an ensemble-based company that creates theater normally based off of what they do. Their aesthetic is that they take pieces of Puerto Rican literature that weren't necessarily meant for the stage and adapt it to the stage using music and all different types of techniques. And they have a long history, and they are amazing. It's an honor to be a part of their ensemble. Now, the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater was a company founded by a Puerto Rican legend actor named Miriam Colon. And Miriam Colon is one of our icons, and may she rest in peace. And she founded this theater company also maybe 40 to 50 years ago in the heart of Broadway section in Manhattan. And it's been around for that long, and the only Spanish language and Latino theater in that area for a long time as well. And so they eventually merged the two companies, and now these two companies have merged, and we have two spaces, one in the Bronx, one in Manhattan, where we are able to produce amazing work. And so so it's an honor to be a part of that ensemble. And that company, they also very recently produced and helped me develop my first ever one-man show, a theater show called Evolution of a Sonero, where I talk about my life and sing songs with a salsa band.
You said what I was thinking, because that was going to be my next question. I was going to say, I know that you displayed on the theater stage this particular production, and it was sold out earlier this year.
Yeah.
Describe the play to our viewers, and can we expect to see it in the future?
Absolutely. Well, the plan is to definitely the show itself has legs, so to speak. So yeah, we're looking to continue to share it wherever we can. And Evolution of El Sonero is a show where I take the I explain the structure of a salsa song and use that structure as a metaphor for my life. Intro, verse, things like that. So it's monologues, it's a love letter to the Bronx, it's a love letter to salsa, and it's a coming of age story. It's yeah, it's funny and dramatic, and it's my life. It's my life up to this point with the help of a kick-ass salsa band. You know?
Would I say it's fair to say that your roots in the Bronx have impacted you and everything that you do?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the sound. It's the one of the soundtracks of my life, and coming from the Bronx with such a rich history that the Bronx has of art and the history that it has of salsa music and struggle and resilience. It's a source of pride. It's one of those things like, you know, I'm super proud of being Puerto Riqueño, and I'll consider myself Puerto Rican before I consider myself American, before I consider myself anything else, right? And then before I consider myself American, I'm a New Yorker. You know what I mean? and then and more importantly, I'm from the Bronx. You know, so it's yeah, it's who I am. It informs a lot of who I am.
I can relate because people will ask me, where are you from? And I'll say, nationality, where I was born.
So it's a complex question.
Because similar to you, my family's from Colombia. I was born here, but if you ask me, I'm Colombian. And I will have people that will say to me, no, then you're American. And I said, well, I mean, technically, but my family's from Colombia, my culture, I mean, everything I identify with is Colombian. Am I proud to be American? Of course. But similar to you.
And if you want to get technical about it, the United States aren't all of America. You know what I mean? Colombian is American, so is Puerto Rican. If you want to talk about it, you know. Sometimes the arrogance of this culture to say that this is America only and exclude the entire continent is crazy.
You're absolutely right. You mentioned early on your affiliation with the Nuyorican Poets Cafe.
Mhm.
And I want our viewers to know all about you because I'm so excited about you. You are also part of HBO's Deaf Poetry Jam. Share with us your experiences with them. And I think I and our viewers at this point already have a sense that the poetry and the salsa music, definitely the two blend for you. Because I wanted to initially ask you, what's the difference? Like, who are you as the poet and who are you as the salsa singer? But I get the feeling that you blend the two.
Yeah, absolutely, I do. So my history with the Nuyorican Poets Cafe is, for those of you that may not know, the Nuyorican Poets Cafe is a legendary venue in New York City in the Lower East Side on 3rd Street between Avenue B and C. And it's the home of a literary movement that came out during the late 60s, 70s called the Nuyorican Poetry Movement. And this was a lot happening along the side of the Black Arts movement that was happening at the time. And it was a response, like I said, art tends to flourish under, I didn't say this, but well now, but art tends to flourish under oppressive regime or the struggle comes out of this, a lot of this art, right? So the 70s were no different. And the Nuyorican poets were, yeah, I come from the same way that I said earlier that I came from the school of the Fania All-Stars. I come from the school of the legendary Nuyorican poets like the Reverend Pedro Pietri, Mikey Piñero, Miguel Piñero, Miguel Algarín, Sandra Maria Esteves, and Jose Jesus Papoleto Melendez, amongst others. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch. Tato La Viera. So these people had this space where they did poetry and theater and music and all of these things, and it's been around for all these years. So as a young person first starting out, that's the place you're gonna go. You have to, if you can't call yourself a poet in New York City and not have done poetry at the New York Poets Cafe. It's just not a, it's not allowed. So I was a kid that I would go down there with no money, lie to the guy at the door, say I needed to use the bathroom, or say that I was one of the featured artists, and sneak in. And eventually, he already knew and just let me in. I was, because for it to be called the New York Poets Cafe at the time during the 90s, there was a bit of a shift in terms of like the people going there, you know, I was this wide-eyed kid thinking that I'm gonna go to the New Eurekan and see these legends hanging out there still. But at this point, it was a little different kind of. It was more of a scene. So there was like, you know, NYU college students looking for a good time, that type of thing. So I was a little disillusioned, but not enough to stop me from going. But with that said, I was part of a small crop of like young New Eurekans. You know what I mean? I was part of this next generation that was coming up. So eventually, yeah, the doorman just kind of would let me in, and I eventually started, and I eventually inherited an open mic where I became the host and hosted this open mic poetry, hip hop, and jazz show for many years, and that was my training ground. So Def Poetry comes around in the year maybe 2001 or 2003 or 4, and by that time there was a vibrant spoken word scene in New York City and all of the other major cities. LA had a vibrant spoken word scene, Chicago, Atlanta, all these spots they were doing it. So when Def Poetry comes around, it was the first time that we're all exposed to each other and the regions, and spoken word was exposed to the world in a large way. Um, so one of my best friends was one of the original cast members of Def Poetry. His name is Lemon Anderson. He's my favorite writer, and he's an amazing writer, also performer. And so he was one of the original cast members. They were one of the first people that they called to be on the show. The show was an HBO series that featured artists from all over the country and internationally as well, and also had celebrities perform. Eventually, that show, they created a Tony Award-winning Broadway version of it. And that, my friend Lemon was one of the original cast members of that. And he was always an advocate for me and had always been like, oh, you need to have my boy Flaco here. Like, there's no reason why, blah, 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 all this stuff. So eventually they called me to be a part of the TV show. I did a couple of episodes, including one poem that I did with Lemon, and it's called Boricuas, which is people. It had been shared millions of times on Facebook or whatever. And so I did a couple of episodes, and then eventually that Broadway show did an international tour. So who would have thought? I definitely not me. I would never have imagined that when I first signed up for this poetry open mic that first time, that I'd be traveling the world performing my poetry. And we went to New Zealand, we went to Australia, we spent a month in Scotland during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and then we also did a national tour of all these regional theaters, and it was a huge experience. It was an amazing experience for me. And it was also during a highly politically charged time during when George Bush was in office. So here I am traveling all over the country and internationally with a eclectic international group of poets, 9 poets and a DJ, and we were speaking our truth, and that was a powerful experience to do that all over. And then also for me personally, traveling so much gave me a newfound perspective about where I was from, and a newfound appreciation of being from the Bronx, and those type of things. So it was a very, that experience with Def Poetry and traveling with them all over was a huge learning ground. I mean, like I said, I fell into this artistic life at a young age, at the age of like 18. So I truly am a student of the University of Life, because everything that I've learned up until this point has been on the job training. You know, I didn't go to art school. I didn't go to music school, or graduate with a degree or a MFA or anything like a lot of my colleagues have. But I learned from them and everyone else that I've had the honor to collaborate with and work with.
What do you hope people take away from this single, your musical sound and your poetry?
I want people to recognize this, feel the sound is familiar and also new. I want them to feel a sense of hope that you know, a change gonna come soon, and that we've been through so much and will continue but we will survive, and we will continue to thrive, and we just have to hold on to our faith, hold on to hope, and also to each other, and this somos más. We're more at when we're united, we are more than the negative. We just thought.
I always want our guests to feel welcomed. You talked about a cappella. That's how you got your start in front of a family gathering. So now I'm going to make a request in front of our viewers, and I want you to feel comfortable. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I've already shared with you that I happen to have a love for music as well.
Nice. Okay.
With that said, can we get you to do a little a cappella right now?
Absolutely. So this song, this is Cántale a la Vida, the single. It was written by myself and Obi Bermudez, and the musical arrangement was done by a brother by the name of Oscar Hernandez. Oscar Hernandez was part of Ruben Blades' Seis del Solal, and he's also the band leader and composer and arranger of Spanish Harlem Orchestra, like multi-Grammy winning people. And they blessed me with this collaboration. So I feel important always to give credit when credit's due. So this is Cántale a la Vida, sing a song to life. Necesitamos amor, aunque sea de lejitos. Necesitamos cariño, para proteger los niñitos. Anoche soñé contigo, soñé que yo te abrazaba y que el tiempo nos sobraba, que no nos faltaba nada. Canta corazón, ay pulmón respira, abre tu balcón y cántale a la vida. Canta corazón, ay pulmón respira, vita la esperanza y hazle una armonía. I be the son of hardcore South Bronx Puerto Rican nationalists. An aguinaldo, bomba y plena, salsa, rumba, singing actor, activist. Llevo el swing del sur del Bronx wherever I go. From the Seine in Paris to old San Juan's callejones. See, I was raised on a steady diet of Rafi Levi La Selecta, KRS-One, The Doors, Bob Marley, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, y música de protesta. I am the tree that grew from the seed planted by Rubén and Willie so many years ago. Siembra. I am Juana Peña and Pedro Navaja's illegitimate child. I am salsa. I am hip hop. I am Puerto Rico. I am the South Bronx. I am New York City. My name is Flaco Navaja. Thank you so much.
That was awesome. I felt like I had my own personal concert. Thank you. I am truly honored, and I know that this will mean quite a lot to our viewers. And it's this beautiful sound. I could see, had someone shared with me, you can combine spoken word, hip hop, and salsa, I would have thought, no. And then you did it so beautifully and so seamlessly, because you were doing your rhythm, and I thought, oh, this is so nice. And then all of a sudden you got serious on me, and I was like, oh, cool. And then it's like it just added on to it. It didn't take away from it, which I
Thank you.
thought was awesome.
Yeah, I think they could all coexist. I think a lot of times, one thing that I always never wanted to do was, and this is just my personal preference and style in terms of my attack. I always wanted to maintain the integrity of the rhythm that I established in the beginning, and didn't feel like I didn't want to go from a salsa tune then all of a sudden hear like this hip hop beat in the background in order for me to rap. I just enjoyed being able to speak over the salsa rhythm or whatever rhythm is there. And that comes from the training that I had at the New Rican Poets Cafe, where the show that we hosted was a open mic that had poets and rappers come on stage with a 3-piece jazz band, and they were no one was allowed to do a cappella. So the music was completely improvised on the spot at the time. Yeah, right then and there. So that taught me so much in terms of the musicality of poetry and the possibilities of, when you have an open mind, how you can change your approach to the expression of it all.
Moving forward, what do you see for the future? What are projects that you still want to work on, or artists that perhaps you want to collaborate with?
Oof. I have a list. Well, I still maintain the dream of collaborating with my musical mentor Ruben Blades. I've had the honor of sharing the stage with him and singing a song with him live at Lincoln Center, and yeah, I'd love to either record a song that he wrote specifically, or collaborate on a song together. I'd love that. And yeah, in terms of what's next, I want to continue to create. I think if we're not able to do live performances, then we have to do something. So that's something that I want to continue to record and release some more material. And then when things open up again, get back to sharing evolution of a sonero, and yeah, maybe starting to continue to create the next solo show that I'm kind of marinating in my head.
Flaco, continue marinating because you're marinating these beautiful flavors. And it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your talent, sharing your story with myself, with our viewers. Just continued success.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure very much. And yeah, you can find me, your viewers can find me on social media, Flaco Navaja at Gmail. Yeah, Flaco Navaja at Gmail, at Instagram, Facebook, and things like that. Also, the song Cántale a la Vida is available now on all streaming platforms: Amazon, iTunes, Apple Music, YouTube Music, all of those things. Share it, please. Find it, share it, comment on it, and yeah, thanks so much.
I will definitely be doing that. Viewers, make sure you share and view.